Right there, look at that right there.
Look at that head shake, man.
Oh, man, that's what we came up here for.
Okay, live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, well, welcome, Joel. Thanks for making your way up here this morning. A little bit of a hike for you.
Not bad. Excited to be here. Just riveted the whole drive up. Well, what are we going to talk about even, right?
Oh, man. Well, we got lots to talk about. Obviously, now you're in your second career. So why don't you just give us a little background on your true professional career, your involvement in the industry, and where you're at now.
Yeah, I started off like I think a lot of us fishy folks in the natural resources areas, right? Like I got a degree in natural resources, went to a college that just is getting closed down, Northland College, and ended up falling in love with mapping at the same time. So GIS was kind of a big thing back then, Geographic Information Systems. And if you've never done that, that's just software that helps you put layers upon layers upon layers, and for our purposes to ask natural resource questions of the data. And I ended up going out to Yellowstone, working out there, doing GIS, had a great time, Yellowstone National Park, working for the Park Service. Then ended up landing a graduate assistantship at the University of Minnesota and doing a grad school career there. A couple of years turned into more years and more years. It just turned into kind of a job for me. And more than a job, a passion, you know, like mapping. You've known me for years, Jeremy. Like that's at heart who I am. I'm a map nerd. I love looking at the data, man. It's just I get lost in that stuff. And so I did that for almost 25 years.
Man.
And then this OnX Fish thing came along.
Right on. So that's really pretty cool how these two paths kind of met. And you've been, I don't want to say quasi in the industry, but you've been in the industry, but not necessarily employed like by a rep group or a media company or a, a manufacturer. So now like you're legit in the fishing business.
Yeah. The whole time, it's so funny doing that GIS career at the University of Minnesota. Yeah, I ran a research lab there. We did a ton of great stuff, but all the while at the same time, I maintained a presence in the fishing industry. I started in internet fishing forums, like just chiming in like most people. And then some of the manufacturers like, hey, okay, what are you doing this weekend? You want to come work the St. Paul ice fishing show for us? And I started doing some things like that, and then writing more, and then some of the video side more. So the whole time I had that career going, I had this moonlighting gig like you kind of alluded to in the fish biz. And I always say to a lot of people that it was like having a foot on two different icebergs. And sometimes those icebergs as careers would float close together, and other times I was doing the splits, man. Like just hard to do it all. And that's why this OnX Fish thing has been awesome, because it's like marriage of the mapping side of things and the data and the fishiness and all the cool stuff there. Yeah, along with the traditional fish biz stuff that we were talking about.
Yeah, what a cool thing to have the your background meet with a company like OnX. And so kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what OnX Fish is. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the OnX Hunt app. Right. A lot of people have used that forever, but now there's a new version, and that goes obviously great with your data background and your GIS work. So
yeah, if you were ever a person, especially Minnesota, but even other states where you looked at things like that DNR Lake Finder, you sent in, like I did as a kid, for paper copy reports on certain lakes and trying to understand what kind of fish were in certain bodies of water, their sizes, their abundance, different characteristics of their species. And then maybe also try to figure out like predator-prey relationships. Like if that was something you were into, OnX Fish is going to be right up your alley, because the thing that we do is we challenge anglers and help them find new lakes at the same time. So I feel very strongly that finding new lakes and fishing new lakes and being a multi-species angler and trying different things makes you better. That's how you get good as an angler. So OnX Fish is going to help you find those new lakes with what you want to catch from a species perspective, in the sizes you want to catch them. And then at the same time, just like OnX Hunt did for hunters all over the U.S., give you the confidence to get there, right? Like if you're planning a trip and you haven't been there and you're not a local, okay, now I know what lakes are there, what's in them, but now I've got the data to find the public accesses, the backwoods trails, if I'm shore fishing or if it's an ice situation, how to find access into otherwise private water bodies that have a publicly adjacent land piece that helps you get in there. So if that's the kind of fishing you do, if you're an adventurer, if you love challenging yourself to do those new things, OnX Fish is for you.
Yeah, it's super cool, and like you hinted, Minnesota has really done a good job, the DNR, with their Lake Finder app. But when you get outside of Minnesota, talking to Wisconsin anglers, they're like, "Dude, you guys don't have any idea how good you got it." So you've been able to take a lot of that data to make the planning way easier, right?
Yeah, so we're in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan right now. We're going to be adding other states in literally weeks and months. And once you get outside of Minnesota, to your point, Wisconsin, these data existed. Like, they're being captured. There's real fisheries biologists that are going out and doing the sampling. But it's been like buried in like paragraphs of PDFs and obscure portions of websites, or maybe not even being electronically published. So to bring that to anglers in Wisconsin, like, it's already been an eye-opening to lots of the Wisconsin folks and Michigan folks that we've been talking to.
Yeah, that's cool. And I, of course, love doing that, the exploring side of things. And there's so many small water bodies. Big water bodies, of course, a lot of people know those. But to your point, if you like fishing, bass, panfish in particular, for me, obviously there's walleye and other opportunities. But if you go to certain parts of the upper Midwest, whether it's in the, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, Michigan, like, there is a lot of choices, right? So,
for sure.
How do you make that choice? How do you navigate to that spot? So decision fatigue can be a real thing, Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah, I look at, especially once the Dakotas come online, there's so much water out there. There's so much water in so much of the Midwest, and you're right. How do you narrow it down? How do you choose where to fish? And we feel very strongly that fisheries data is somewhat of an equalizer for that, because you can go off reports and you can go off of things you maybe saw on the internet. There's other apps and other things that give you resources to show like catches, but some of it's maybe not as believable, right? Like, maybe somebody's protecting their honey hole and leading you astray. And so we kind of feel like fisheries biology and fisheries science in general, and the data they share, is kind of this insight into a world that you probably wouldn't have credible information towards otherwise. Like I said, a lot of other ways to get information, but information that's based on reports is often stale. It's seasonal. It's like, if the report's being made and you're reading it, well, you probably should have been there yesterday. Maybe it was a flash bite. Maybe it was just a window of opportunity. We're simply telling you that in this lake or in these areas, fish that you want to catch and the species you want to catch are there. They're present. So then it's up to you as an angler to kind of figure some of those other things out on your own.
That's great. And so OnX is really a tech company. I mean, you're kind of a techie guy. What's it like working for a company like that?
It's very interesting, because when I first started, I guess I wasn't prepared for it to be more like a Google and less like a Rapala, for a fishing industry example. Mm-hmm. Very fishy, super outdoorsy, very passionate towards the outdoors, but they're data driven. Everything they do is based on, what do customers want? What does the data tell us that they want? We can literally look in portions of the app and say, well, anglers are clicking on this spot in the app a ton. Like, what are they trying to get at? If they're searching specifically in this Lake Finder portion of what we have, or they're filtering specifically a lot on trophy potential, let's say for panfish, we understand that at least seasonally right there, the intent of the angler is to figure out where trophy panfish are during that part of the year. And then we kind of lean into that and give people more of what they want, and then less of what they don't, and then kind of test into things. So that's just one example in a way in which this is it was very interesting. My analytical mind, like, it's they have given me so much to chew on. Sometimes it is like drinking out of a fire hose, really.
That's great. Well, we've been talking a lot about tech. Let's switch gears a little bit to fishing. I know you've got spots you fish all over the place, but you're down in more southeastern Minnesota, so. Yeah. I'm assuming there's a lot of fishing that happens on the Mississippi, waters adjacent to the Mississippi, river bites. And as you're looking at early summer, How are you approaching river fishing situations? What are some of the species opportunities? How are you reading flow levels? And, to me, what's so cool about rivers is how dynamic they are, how much fish can move, and they just present so many great opportunities, but they can seem intimidating because they are so dynamic.
Yeah, it's always the situation where I tell people, like, if at all possible, like if you're a lake angler and rivers freak you out, try to spend 3 days at it or 2 strong days at it where you can learn your way through some of those dynamics, and by the end of day 2 or certainly into day 3, you feel way more comfortable. Weather patterns, flow, like you said, definitely water levels can change things around a little bit. This time of year, there's a couple just historical bites that kick off. Like we're in the post-spawn now for walleyes. We're starting to get towards early summer, and that's really what I'm starting to think of as we get into May. There's some really good fish activity near the shorelines, up against those rocky edges. The water temps are such that, like in places like Lake Pepin or even some of the cuts in the Mississippi River, you don't have to be out in the middle. You don't have to be center current. You don't have to be offshore the way they will be eventually. Everything's happening up against that bank, and if we've got higher water, I'm actually kind of excited by some of the rains that we've gotten lately, because we'll have willows that are up and down these banks. The rocky areas obviously have a lot of wood and other things, but you get some sandier shorelines that are nothing but willows. And when those willows flood, it is unbelievable. As long as the water temps are right, bait fish are there in droves, right? And then you've got this killer situation where you can troll up against the edges, literally your rod tip's almost tickling the edges of these willows, or you can pitch at them individually. Any points definitely concentrate fish on those willows, and you in a day will catch the craziest of traditional rough species, but you'll catch channel cats, smallmouth, largemouth walleye, sauger, pike mixed in, largemouth bass. Like, it is a panacea of opportunity because everything's up there pushing bait. And then as that water level starts to recede later into May into June, yeah, you'll get those walleyes, especially that I'm typically after, sauger, they'll push to that next break. So when I'm thinking ahead to river bites, and I'm thinking specifically of kind of that Mississippi River south towards Wabasha and Winona, I start to think of flooded willows first, and then especially with wind, that's really good. And then as you get into summer, well, then I'm thinking traditional opportunities offshore more. Maybe that's lead core if you're so inclined. Maybe that's pulling live bait if you want to do that. If you want to pull spinners, that's another great opportunity, although be careful with worms on the Mississippi. You might catch so many sheephead, it'll just drive you crazy.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. And, rivers are so different. I grew up fishing small rivers. The Mississippi that we have here in Brainerd is way different than the Mississippi is down in Metro and South. So they're much different. And how are you looking at that? Because I know you have access to really small rivers. So how do you compare the way the water moves in a small river compared to a big river? Are there a lot of things that just basically are mirrored, but in a larger, or the scale is just different?
I would definitely echo the comment you said about scale being different. Driving up north as a kid and seeing the Mississippi River up by Brainerd, you go over a bridge and you're like, holy cow, there's a lot of rocks in this one. We're not, if we have rocks in ours, we're not used to seeing them. They're certainly not above the water, but you guys have a lot of current eddies, current seams, pools, riffles that are more traditional to maybe what you would consider a trout stream to be. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in this section, once you get down to the Mississippi down by me, you've got big point. It's all bigger. The scale is way, way big, like you said. Massive points that would be, if it were on a lake, you'd be like, well, that's a massive lake point. Or we've got day markers. Those are control structures and directions for barge drivers, these big green and red signs. And at the bases of these posts, there's huge rocks. And so if you get an outside bend, and that's controlling flow on the Mississippi River, and there's a day marker kind of near that outside bend, you're going to have reasonable current seams, some back eddy action, an area, a respite for walleyes where they can sit out of the current, study what's coming down in current, and rush out and eat. It's not that different from what you guys have up here. It's just at a different scale, and you kind of have to twist your brain around down there. and think about, okay, I'm not seeing what's happened above the water like I can maybe up here, but down there, I have to envision what's going on below the water in areas that I can't see, but take what cues I can from the shore. Another one's clam shells. Man, we have clam beds down there that are crazy. And raccoons during low water times will go in and get a lot of those clams, and they'll eat them, and there'll be shells all over the shoreline. And you're like, boom, if I go straight down for where raccoons or other species and things ate those clams, I know that I'm gonna have a clam bed, and it's just a hard bottom area. You go down there and there's life. You look, there's crayfish down there. There's a lot of stuff going on. So clam beds are another tip off for what we're looking for in that part of the river.
That's super cool. Yeah, I love fishing rivers, and you were talking about using worms and just catching everything. But that is one of the fun things about river fishing is you just really never know what you're gonna catch. So
I was steelhead fishing in Wisconsin this weekend just for a little bit, and I'm no steelheader. That's not what I do. But it's cool. It's timely. Tis the season. And we were just using crawlers. We tried eggs and spawn sacks and things like that and didn't have much luck. And the water was pretty dirty, so we put on some crawlers, and I caught a long-nosed sucker. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those.
I haven't seen one, no.
They're wild. And it had this huge red string along the side of its body. It looked like a red-sided dace almost.
Oh, really?
And it was huge. It was almost 4 pounds. And I looked later, like the Wisconsin record is like almost 4 pounds. So this, I'll have to share a picture. But anyways,
whoa.
Yeah. To your point about not knowing what you're going to catch, the size it's going to be, species that you're not really all that familiar with, like kind of brings out the kid in a lot of us just catching something totally wild and having to look it up, right?
Yeah, right. And the other thing about rivers too that I think is important, at least with my experience, and maybe it's just because I'm not that in tune with electronics on rivers, but I've spent a lot of time where you could go fish a lake and you're willing to look at your 2D and your side imaging and just run around and be like, okay, there's fish. This is the right habitat. Oh, yep, I'm seeing fish in this area. There's bait, blah, blah, blah. It seems like a lot of times in rivers, especially if the flow is high, like you can drive around and you just don't see fish.
For sure.
So you do have to learn to read water. Like, okay, is this the right type of spot? And a bait is what fishing actually shows you the fish. Is that your experience as well?
100%, especially if you go back in time. Our electronics are a little bit better now. We have a little more power to see into some of those areas, but still in a river, those fish can hide really well. And especially you get these areas where the sand really makes some dunes, and those fish can sit in those troughs. And I don't care how good your electronics are. A walleye belly to bottom in the center of a trough is going to look like a stick or a log or maybe nothing. Mm-hmm. And to your point about reading water, we've got a lot of things to read, right? Like we've got the traditional things you would in a lake. Amount of light. Is it a cloudy day, a sunny day? But you got to think of then of turbidity. That's a constantly changing dynamic in the river. Sometimes you're looking for clear water because everything else is turbid. Unless it's too cold. Maybe in the springtime, if it's chilly, it's like, no, we don't want that.
Yeah.
You really have to reason out as an angler, I think, seasonal patterns. What are the fish looking for? And then in turn think, well, what am I looking for? And how does observing my physical environment play into this? Not reading what I see on a screen, but reading some of those old-timey things, man, like phenology, looking at, well, the trees are pretty far along at this point, and I know that typically that means that in May I've got a really killer shallow bite over by Bay City Flats. Like, just because I see the trees leafed out at a certain stage, I know to go to the Bay City Flats. Well, all of that stuff comes with experience, but if you can put those pieces of the puzzle together, again, that's the stuff that makes you a better angler. Yeah,
it's fun. That the rivers, again, just super dynamic. So let's switch gears a little bit to some lake fishing, and I know you're a multi-species angler, Joel, but do spend a lot of time pan fishing, and obviously the Midwest does have some great panfish opportunities for crappies and bluegills. And one of the areas that I really enjoy, and we were chatting about this before you got on here, is that kind of western Minnesota, the prairie forest transition. We spent a lot of time in that Alexandria area as well, which is kind of on the south side of that. You get the big hardwoods, but there's so much water over there. What are some of the things that you're looking for with panfish? And I'm maybe not asking this right also, but why do you think that area given your GIS background, is so good for panfish?
I look towards diversity as a part of that, right? Like my first experience with looking at some of those areas was fishing them personally as a kid, but then also later in life learning more about kind of the glacial geology of some of these areas. You mentioned that prairie forest border in Minnesota. It's that area just southeast of Alexandria, then wrapping up through Alexandria all the way up to Detroit Lakes and then further north. And a lot of the glaciers of the recent glaciation kind of stopped there. They stagnated. A lot of chunks of ice fell off, created lakes, but also pushed up a lot of different substrate. And then you had Glacial Lake Agassiz, which flooded out of kind of northwestern Minnesota all the way down, created beach ridges and beach areas. And so you've got this hard dividing line between the prairies, North Dakota, South Dakota looking lakes, right? Bulrush stem, heavy slough look and feel to it. Then you get kind of that border where there's a ton of lakes. There's just that swath of lakes, Alexandria, prime example. Some mixed hardwoods there, and eventually you push east and north, and you get into like the southern part of the northern boreal forest. And because there was so much glaciation in those areas, there's a lot of diversity. And you tend to run into a stream of bluegill lakes there that kind of have a little bit of the best of both worlds. Some of those lakes have shrimp in them, just like you would see in North Dakota. But all of them are pretty darn buggy. And I think that those invertebrates and certain species of invertebrates and various substrates and opportunities for different hatches, along with the opportunity to find things like gravel and rock and having a diverse array of aquatic plants in them, makes for really good bluegill fisheries. And I can also think of another belt, kind of north central Minnesota, that extends, south of Leech Lake a little bit, north of Brainerd, and that runs kind of east-west, and up in the Grand Rapids area, you've got a belt of some really good bluegill and panfish waters. Again, those waters, while they don't share the same characteristics as the prairie forest border ones, they have really buggy environments. They've got great aquatic plants, a lot of great cabbage. So when you can find that diversity, especially in that Alexandria area, some good cabbage, some lakes that are kind of Jekyll Hyde. They're kind of like a slough lake, but they're kind of like a northern lake. Multi-species fishing is really good, and pan fishing is really good. That's what I found.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, and especially those more western lakes. You see those, that northeast Minnesota. It does, of course, have big panfish up there, but I think a lot of those fish are big ancient fish.
Yeah.
They're, undisturbed, and that's kind of the allure up there is they just don't get the pressure.
Right.
But you get west, and the productivity, the substrate, the soil, whatever it is, I mean, it just grows life, plants, bugs, and the fish just grow faster. They replace themselves quicker.
Totally.
And it's just it's just such a fertile environment. And for bass fishing too, and you look at across the state for largemouth, I mean, that zone is largemouth heaven.
Yeah, and it's dynamic because bluegills and largemouth, I mean, hand in hand, right? Like they have this symbiotic kind of relationship where some of the best bluegill waters for big bluegills I've ever fished are incredible trophy bass lakes.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I've spent a lot of time, probably as much if not more time, looking for largemouth bass lakes in that Alexandria area. And a couple things that I would always look for would be quality bluegills. Obviously, you're looking for a lot of really good habitat in the lake, but sometimes they just are there. There's always those wild cards. But then another item that I always saw happen would be like you'd see black bullheads, high abundance of black bullheads in lakes, and you can see that something's a little bit different about that fishery. And man, it would produce big largemouths.
It's so funny too. I think of bluegills and largemouth, and some of the best ones that I've ever fished don't always have the best accesses, right? They can be harder to get to. Yeah. That can scare off some guys with, big, huge boats that require a perfect, deep, sloping access. And so I love trying to launch into some skinny water to find those areas because I hope that other people are maybe turned off by it.
Yeah. I think it's no secret that the less fishing pressure there is, usually the better the fishing is. And while we're talking about panfish, we're getting into this June timeframe here, where if you like fishing, like June is the month to fish. Fish are still shallow. They're biting. I mean, there's bluegills might still be spawning in some areas, but a lot of the spawning's done, and we're starting into early summer. What is your if you got a Saturday in June, it's wide open, Joel, what are you doing?
Man, because it is so good, and I know even if the weather's not perfect, and even if conditions otherwise aren't what I want them to be, I know that something is biting somewhere. So if there's ever a month to fish fast or to just try to be efficient, that's like the time. So I'm throwing fast-moving baits. If I'm fishing panfish, I'm swimming jigs and plastics, just trying to cover a lot of water. If I'm fishing bass with my boys or pike or even walleyes, I'm employing some really rapid pace techniques because I want to find them. And even if they're a little bit slower because of weather or whatever, I can always in June count on somebody showing up and then kind of maybe tipping me off to, hey, you should spend a little more time on this weed line. Like, you just caught a really nice bass here and you were power fishing and maybe you got to slow down a touch. Mm-hmm. But this is not the time of year to go and fish a memory and camp on your favorite spot and wait them out. Like, that's just not it in June, because I think it was a fisheries biologist years ago that kind of explained that June period to me in a way that still resonates with me today. He was talking about bait fish, and he just said that, bait fish may have been born already, but they're not necessarily at a size where game fish are targeting them yet. Mm-hmm. So you've got this idea of ramping biological activity, metabolism ramping because of water temps for game fish, but not a ton of available young of year quite yet. Mm-hmm. That'll come, right? And then they get a little fat and sassy and a little happier later. But it's this perfect deal. It's like, when am I hungriest? It's like when there's not as much food around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just so fun that time of year too, because you don't need a lot of tech. I mean, this is the time of year too where you can just go out, look at the shoreline, say, oh, okay, there's some irregularities here. There's some trees down. Oh, I see some cabbage toppers popping up, and just go throw baits and go old school and do a lot of catching.
Yeah, my boys love that time of year, and they love pepper and banks and throwing till their arms sore. Like, it's just awesome.
Oh, it is the best. Yeah, my son's got a paddle boat, and in fact, this year we just got redid the John boat, got a better trolling motor on there this year, and he's just jacked, whatever, just gets to go throw at the shore, just that magic and mystery and wonder. And of course he likes playing with all kinds of stuff, but he's just going to be Mr. Ned, just throwing a Ned rig like all day, every day, catching sunnies, catching crappies, catching obviously tons of bass. So it's great. And that is definitely the best time. And the fish are just accessible. They're easy to catch. And walleyes that time of year too. I mean, we go up to Leech every year for the photo shoot up there too, and it's like I don't know how many times we've been up there. The fishing is outstanding during that week. It's like you need some fish for photos, or you're going to go do this. Yeah, I can get walleyes, and 2 weeks later when we get a chance to go up there and film, like that bite dies. So there's a short window too for walleyes, but it can be so good.
It can be dynamic, and it always depends on timing with how ice out went, what water temps have elevated to, what kind of weather hand you're dealt. But you're right, there's that it can be pre-June, it can be just the very tippy end of May or spilling into June a ways, where, things are still shallow. Those walleyes especially have not moved offshore to like deep humps like they will in the summer. And they're acting a lot more like bass, I think. Mm-hmm. You could catch them like bass. Yeah. You could throw Ned rigs. Like the guys on Mille Lacs that are beating up on walleyes on Ned rigs, super shallow, always blows a lot of us away, because by that time, a lot of us are thinking like, maybe we're power corking or we're chasing them around deep. And no, man, those fish during that time period you're talking about could be real shallow. And God, is it fun to catch a walleye like a bass? I don't know why. For me, it's just, I was always brought up to believe that you really had to kiss up to a walleye to catch him,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
When you don't have to?
Yeah.
What a blast.
It's just a surprise still every time. Whoa, walleye bit of jerkbait. Whoa, walleye bit of Ned rig. Hey, what is this? This shouldn't happen. Yeah. So let's circle back a little bit to panfish, because that's a time of year that it seems like there's a huge drop off in panfish participation. It's like, okay, yeah, we got the crappies pre-spawn. We caught them when they were nesting. And now it's June, it's summertime. They're gone, so to speak, but they're really not, right? Like this is a great time of year to target panfish.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we start thinking about panfish in the springtime. You're thinking about the spawn for crappies, and then you move your way into June, and you're going to have bluegills that'll be spawning, right? So they're shallow, but eventually that dissipates, and I think this is the time of year where a lot of people do say that. They're like, oh, this is it's getting weird. Like, they're not as easy to, like, I don't just pull up to a reed bank and throw bobbers and catch them anymore. That doesn't mean they're not there. The fish move out to these flats, especially, and that's what I tend to want to jig troll for them, because they can be dispersed a little bit more well into the summer, and I love fishing that way. I think it's really effective. I think it's not just effective, like sometimes trolling can be a way to find fish and not necessarily catch them that well, but you find them. Jig trolling for panfish is something that I do a lot of to find and catch them, because if they are dispersed, covering water just may be the best way, bar none, to get it done.
Okay, so I'm guessing that I'm sure many people are familiar, but plenty of people probably aren't familiar with what you mean by jig trolling for panfish.
Yeah. It's something that a good buddy of mine taught me, and he's originally from the Aiken area, and it works really well there, and I was surprised that it worked in western Wisconsin, the southern Minnesota, northern Minnesota, Canadian Shield Lakes, prairie potholes. And all it is a simple program of getting a jig anywhere from 32nd ounce, 16th ounce typically, tipping it with a soft plastic of your choice. A lot of times for me, that's a boot tail, especially where there's a lot of gills, because the gills have to grab any other kind of tails and rip them off, and then your plastic isn't as enticing. And we literally drop the bow mount, and later in the summer, crappies tend to suspend out in the deep, like just below the top of the surface, anywhere 5 to 15 feet down. Bluegills will be on the edges of these flats, sometimes roaming along the cabbage. And whether you're after either of them, it's about pulling in the locations that they're at. Either you identify it via side imaging, or you just you're looking. And you take this jig and plastic, you cast it out, one cast behind the boat, you drop the bow mount, and you go 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 miles an hour, and you just hold the rod off to the side, just like it was a crankbait. But you're conditioned to believe that won't work, because you're not feeling the dig of a crankbait. It's almost like a dead feeling, right? You don't feel the ripple of that plastic. But meanwhile, it's doing a couple things for you. It's covering water for dispersed fish, number one. Number two, depending on the weight that you're using, and my kids have been lab rats in these experiments without even knowing it, right? Like, one of them's got a 32-ounce black jig on, the other one's got a 16th-ounce pink and white jig on, and we're trying to work our way through what the fish are telling us works. And we pull through these areas, and I shouldn't be amazed, but it just continues to work everywhere I go. And I tell you, if you're going to try it for the first time, find a place that's fishy, an area where you know like some crappies and bluegills are already, and you'll be amazed, because one thing I found for crappies especially, whenever you're reeling, like say you're going to cast and reel at these fish, when you're reeling, a lot of times you're imparting with every crank of the handle a dip and a raise in the rod. So as you're doing this, it's almost second nature. It's just happening. That bait is actually swimming like this, and that's a pain in the ass for crappies. Like, they don't love. They track baits. We know this with forward facing. Like, they'll track behind it, and it's hard to catch up for a crappie if it's constantly bopping up and down. What did Jason Durham say? I don't know if I'd trust a hamburger if it hit the ceiling left all the time too, which is a pretty good saying. But when that's going a constant rate and in a straight horizontal line, those crappies can track it and then overtake it. Like, feed up at a 45, come up and grab it. So I think trolling offers you an ability to keep that bait in their face and make the retrieve a way that they're more likely to eat it.
Yeah, it is amazing. I've done a fair amount of it too. And you were kind of hitting on the weights, and if you can expand on this a little bit, because the biggest mistake I would say is that you would be fishing too deep, especially for crappies. Bluegills can tend to be a little closer to the bottom, but the amount of line you've got out, the diameter of the line, the weight of the jig, the profile of the plastic, those all come into play. And especially, I would say, if you're fishing in the evening, later in the day, the fish do tend to rise up a little more. So you would want to favor being closer to the surface. But walk through kind of okay, I'm going to do this tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon. What rod, reel, line, jig weight, plastic are you putting on there?
So typically I'm using a 7-foot rod, St. Croix Legend Elite Panfish or Avid Panfish Series, 7-foot light power, extra fast action. I like an extra fast action, not that you necessarily need it for this trolling regime, but I love having just that perfect amount of give on the tip of these rods such that I can detect a bite. The fish doesn't necessarily feel me as easily, and then I can set the hook and just put a good hook to them, and especially for trophy crappies, feel like I didn't just hook them by the tip of the snoot. And for line, I'm a big fan of fluorocarbon for this application. I don't think you need it to be fluorocarbon, but I like it's a little bit lower stretch. And I use typically 6-pound Seagar, and that Seagar is a little bit thinner diameter, so I feel I can get away with a little bit more because I catch walleyes doing this, certainly catch bass doing this. Trophy panfish, which isn't a problem until you start getting near some weeds or some stalks of cabbage. But I feel I can get away with 6-pound Seagar fluorocarbon, but just about anything works there. And people always ask me, like, shoot, do you have a general guideline for how deep this bait runs? And it's like, I don't, because like a Northland crappie thumper with a blade on it's going to ride a little bit higher. I also use Northland's tungsten, like tungsten crappie king. That one's going to drop a little bit deeper. I love the ability to, on the day that I'm fishing, fish a variety of weights first. Weights is my first thing. Like you hit right on it. At night, the lighter weights are going to get you bit way more. It's just it. But different jig head styles and designs, especially if they're thinner tungsten, are going to dive deeper. Lead with a bulkier plastic, going to ride higher. Blade, going to ride higher. So I rely on day of data to make my simple cast, have a couple people in the boat, and we just experiment our way through this thing. That makes it more interesting for me, but I've got a couple standbys, definitely. 6-pound fluorocarbon, like I said, that St. Croix rod, 7-foot length. I like a little bit away from the boat. And then I use a 7-reel 1000 series GX. And then I'm pulling, like I said, typically a little faster, 0.3, 0.4. And for my plastics, they've got this new Pan Candy stuff. It's that TPE plastic. It's a little bit more buoyant. So I'll start with that stuff. And then I'm just testing my way through it. I know that those combinations catch fish. And one more tip, I'd say color matters least of all in the equation. There's times where certain lakes are color, they're going to dial in. But that's more rare to me. What's way more consistently powerful is the weights that we're using.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's a great explanation. It's interesting to me that you're using fluorocarbon. I just haven't used a lot of straight fluorocarbon for panfish stuff since some of these newer braids like the Nano braid and Revolve that we've been fishing with. Like it just has replaced it. So I've been a lot more one-dimensional. It's like I left the 4 and 6 pound mono world and went into this, but that also just the diameter can affect. So I could see that playing a role just because it is a larger diameter than a 6 pound braid.
For sure.
So you're going to get more lift out of the bait. Because of it.
And mono's different because mono floats, fluoro sinks. So if you have a lot of mono out with light jigs, unless you're pulling really fast, there's a slight buoyancy effect to it. So that's why it's not like the trolling Bible with crankbaits, where I can tell you that at 150 feet back, this bait's going to go 8 to 11 feet. Those hard and fast rules are a little harder to come by because we're not using line counter reels first and foremost, right? We're using spinning rods and reels. Right. And then second of all, we're actively adjusting lots of different, panfish jigs and plastic combinations to arrive at kind of the right depth. And the cool part is it's a little more forgiving. Like, as long as you're above them, I feel like you got a better crack than if you're below them, to your point earlier. Give them a chance. They'll come up 4 or 5 feet.
You bet.
But if you're way below them, it's a non-starter.
Yeah, if you're catching a lot of rock bass and you're catching a lot of bluegills, like that's like your first indication that if you're targeting crappies, you gotta lighten up. Get up higher in the water column, like that you could. Because usually all of those fish are in an area together.
Right.
It's just that the crappies are occupying the upper space.
And in my neck of the woods, if you're catching a lot of walleyes or you're getting walleyes, you're probably a little too deep as well.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And just, I'm just going to add this too, is that, the jig trolling thing is of course effective, but don't overlook trolling hard baits for panfish as well. Man, like caught tons and tons of panfish trolling hard baits, especially crappies. Bluegills will bite them too, but that little Countdown Elite is one of my favorites. Another one is the slab wrap. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with that one, but I've caught tons and tons and tons of crappies on that same deal. So trolling just isn't really in the pan fishermen's world in the northern part of the country anyway. Of course, they push and pull down south with stuff, but up here, single rod anglers don't do it. Absolutely deadly effective.
And don't be afraid to fish lipless either. Like you were saying, like the slab wrap or like the rip and wrap or the rip and shad. Like in stained water, for me, that might be the bait I start with.
Sure. Yeah. Little bigger profile, a little bit more noise, moving more water.
Easier to find, easier to track down.
Yep. And crappies can be super aggressive. They can just be...
They can be predators,
yeah,
man.
They can get after it. So when you're talking about rods earlier, I have to agree that Legend Elite panfish rod is the deal, the one you mentioned. Can you dive into a little bit, because we were talking about this earlier, how you choose rods? Like in the St. Croix lineup, we have that common partner, St. Croix, and they make these panfish rods, rods for everything and for every fish that swims. But give us a little dive into, I know you're a real technical guy and the technical stuff of this.
My first experience with trying to select a good walleye rod came when I cut my teeth kind of on the Mississippi River, end of my high school days, into my college days, late 90s, early 2000s, and there wasn't as many options. But some clear favorites arose for a walleye jigging combo. If I'm going to pitch plastics at shorelines, 6'8" was about the right length. Medium power was about the right power. Extra fast actions made it easy to both, like I said, for crappies, detect bites, but also get the backbone really quick. And so then you started to break it down a little further, and you're like, okay, there really is a tool that's better for this. My dad, back on the farm, we could use a screwdriver for a punch, or you could use a punch for a punch, right? Like using the right tool for the job, in other words, really makes a difference. And St. Croix, it's really lucky the way they've got some of the stuff laid out. It's intimidating at first. You look, there is dozens of series of rods, ranging from like $100 all the way up to like $700. And then you've got species-specific rod lineups, and you've got ones that are broad in general, and there's casting rods, spinning rods, and it's like, well, where do you start? And I think for anglers that are just starting to put together an arsenal, number one, recognize that there are right tools for the job. Mm-hmm. And, like I can, screwdriver punch analogy. But when it comes down to it, the easiest way that I have found is to go to the Tournament Walleye Series or the Tournament Bass Series. And on those rods, you'll see something like Jiggin' Pig, Sloppin' Frog. On the walleye side, you'll see Power Bobber or you'll see Riggin'. And you start to understand that these are specific techniques, like just technique-driven rod selections. And then you look at the code on that rod, and it's like, that's the key. That's your Rosetta Stone. So go to that key, and it'll say like PNS means Panfish Series. Okay, PNS. All right. So I know that's a Panfish Series. 7.0, that's a 7-foot rod. L means light power. Power is the amount of mass or force that it takes to put a deflection on the blank. It goes from ultralight, light, medium, and then you've got the action, which is different from power. Action is where on the blank that blank deflects. Where does it bend? Is it closer to the butt section? Is it way out to the tip? If it's way out to the tip, that's an extra fast action. Closer to the butt section, it's moderate or slow even. But if you understand that Rosetta Stone code, PNS 70LXF, and you realize that in that series, that's a superior panfish rod for me, maybe. Mm-hmm. You can go up and down the lineup and find another 70LXF. You can find that in Avid panfish. You can find that in Legend Elite. Maybe you don't want to spend $400, $500 on a panfish rod. I get it. Find that length, power, and action that's dynamite, but find it somewhere else in the lineup. And for bass, that same thing exists. For walleyes, that same thing exists. Their perfect snap jigging or pitching rod, it'll say snap jig or pitch, and it'll be a 6/8 MXF. Well, maybe I don't want that in a Legend tournament walleye. Maybe that's just too expensive a rod for me. I don't have a need for that tech. Go down to the Icon series and buy a 6/8 MXF. So that to me has been the key to breaking down the perfect technique-specific rod, no matter if you have a little to spend and you want to go a value play, or you want to get like something to really treat yourself on, a really fine-tuned, perfect tool that you'll have for years to come.
That's a great explanation, Joel. And when we talk about this stuff, doing seminars over the course of the year, I think that's a really important message to drive home. Just understanding that, because you can just think a rod is a rod, but the way your baits perform, the way it handles, everything about it is specifically fine-tuned in that setup. And having the right tool for the job will make the experience better and most often help you catch more fish.
Yeah, catch more fish. People say, well, am I really going to catch more fish? And the answer is absolutely. And especially on certain bites and in certain rods. If I'm fishing let's say a spinnerbait bass bite, for me, I don't need as technical of a piece of equipment, but I'm not much of a bass angler. Now, panfish, people argue to me all the time, why would you spend that much on a panfish rod? I was like, well, you've got something here that already bites light. Crappies can up hit, you know.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you're casting small, tiny micro jigs. How do you make them go far on light line? Like a good tool in that situation solves for a ton of different problems. And it wasn't until I was down again on the Mississippi River and guys I was with were getting bit just like I was, but they're detecting the bites. I wasn't. Or they're anticipating because they see how their line flows through the guides and how it'll bow up and actually load up the rod as the line is literally catching the current more, and they know that they've got too much loose line. Like, those are deep take situations where that tool, game changer. The day's different with a better tool.
It is, 100%. Yeah, I remember when the Legend Elite panfish came out and people were just going nuts, like, why would you do that? It's like, well, hey man, like, you can go spend as much as you want on a muskie rod, as much as you want on a walleye rod, as much as you want on a bass rod. I like panfishing too.
Yeah.
I never had that option. I got to go to Fleet Farm and buy the 5-foot ultralight for $39, and you can't, you know what I mean? So you're using like walleye gear and other pieces of equipment,
right,
really to fish fine tune. So I, of course, am a huge fan of that. And seriously, I think we both agree St. Croix will probably hate us for this because they can never make enough of them. But that 70 LXF Legend Elite panfish is the most impressive panfish rod ever to show up on planet Earth.
I think you owe it to yourself to own one somewhere in that series, and then from there you can get more technical if you want. Like, there's some brush bites that I fish where that 7.3 MLXF, it's a walleye rod. Let's be honest, It's a walleye rod. But it works better around heavy cover for big crappies or big gills because I have extra length, and it's a little bit more power for me to just kind of lead those fish out of that cover. And then you'll see the same thing for a vertical jigging bite. There's times early in the spring where I'm literally fishing off the bow. I don't want a 7-foot rod. I want something a little bit shorter, but I still want that same bite detection. I want the ability to feel. So that's when you can get technical and go up and down the lineup for all these things.
Yeah, man. Well, cool. While we're on panfish, why don't we talk about Joel? Because I know that you love cooking. You're into food.
Yeah.
And I know you love bourbon too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we
Guilty.
should talk about that. Guilty as charged. So let's go through Joel's favorite way to cook fish.
Yeah.
Like, what's your crowd pleaser?
I'm pretty boring basics. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that my family really likes it that way. And when I cook fish, it's not about cooking it for me. I've been just like you at a million fish camps, have had a million fish fries. I've had it baked and poached and grilled. And like, we've done all those things. And to me, that's interesting. That's fun because I like trying it different ways. But man, anybody I'll ever cook it for, my family, they want outside. It's the environment. It's the atmosphere. I'm using a turkey cooker and a cast iron pot. Holds heat pretty darn well. And I'm typically using some peanut oil with a cornmeal style batter. They love that. And it's about keeping that oil really hot, not too hot that you're going to scorch it, but kind of in that 375 to 400, dunking it well, not overcooking it, maintaining temperatures, right? If you dump a pile of fish in, that oil temp declines. I make a homemade tartar sauce loaded with dill, loaded with lemon zest, chopped up pickles, like that kind of thing. That's an extra little fun deal. And then I always tend to do potatoes first, and we've got like a ribbon cutter. It's like this thing that I hook up to a power drill, and then I shoot a whole potato into that thing like State Fair style, and it fries up a bunch of chips. We put like barbecue rib rub seasoning on it to make like barbecue chips.
No way.
Yeah, so it's about the experience and the atmosphere a fish fry is for me, and it's for family more. So I'm pretty boring, but like doing those boring basics really well. We were talking just before we started about a long, not quite hot oil bath. Like that's the worst. Like we've all had just oily, gross fish.
Yeah, it's just brutal.
Who wants that? And what you feel like afterwards is even worse. So yeah, I'm pretty basic, but that's been the hit for me and my family.
So when you're, it sounds like you're making your own breading or batter.
Yep.
Are you got any seasonings?
Yeah.
Do you add some flour to the cornmeal too, or
I
kind of?
do just a little bit to help with coating. I tend to do a third mixture, equal parts of cornmeal, yellow cornmeal, like we talked about, flour for coating and coverage. And then, my brother makes sourdough, and so we always got breadcrumbs around. So, like really good sourdough breadcrumbs. But you can experiment with a lot of different ways to do that, however you want your ratios to work out. But for me, a mixture of celery salt in the seasoning with black pepper and paprika. But if I don't go that route, Old Bay is like a really quick hack.
Yeah.
And I spent some time out on the East Coast, and for whatever reason, I really love that seasoning. Mm-hmm. So for every cup of finished mix, I typically have 2 tablespoons at least of Old Bay in there. And the trick is almost over salted, I think. When it fries, it loses some of that. Some of it flakes off. It tempers some of that saltiness a little bit. And I always try to fry a test piece or two. And if I got to cut it with more flour or cornmeal, I do that, right? Like, this isn't the time to screw up. Like, fish, like they're special.
Yeah.
Fillets and frying that up, like that's a special thing.
It is.
Don't screw it up.
Right, exactly. That's a good tip I think you added on the cooking side of things. When you're making your own batter, like you look at, okay, I got this little batch here and think you need a little bit of this for spices, but it's really way heavier than if you've never done it before. Way more spices, salt than you would think. Yeah, yep, exactly.
And you could even taste like the dry batter, and you'd be like, "Whoa, that's too much." And it's like you fry it off, and you're like, "No, that's perfect."
That's perfect. Yep.
And if in case it's not spicy enough or flavorful enough, it never hurts to, when you just pull them out of the oil, finish with some garlic salt right on top. Like that's a Tony Roach tip. Like I got that from him, and he's got a lot of stories about frying fish for Gary. Gary.
Oh yeah, back in the day, yeah.
Yeah, he was a 16-year-old that was like going to every L&M and hardware store up and down the lakes area to get it done. But I think that's another great tip.
Yeah, well, fish fries are something that everybody loves to do. I'm actually glad you mentioned fish fries because it's a crowd pleaser. Yeah, I mean it's something you don't want to eat every day, but a couple times a year.
Yep.
Good old-fashioned fish fry is just absolutely amazing to eat. So before we wrap this up, Joel, if I'm just listening to this and I get the OnX Fish app, can you give us one tip to start with on something that you should use this app for right away?
Yeah. First thing you do with the app, get it downloaded, get signed on. You guys even have a promo code, I think. You got to go to the website and utilize your promo code to get 20% off. And then what you can do is literally pull this app up and click all. At the top of the screen, all is our filters function. And that filter is the number one thing that everybody should use to help them eliminate water. And as anglers, we're always looking to find new lakes, but to find kind of the forest through the trees to kind of, arrive on the lake you want, select your species and then select Am I looking for trophies? Am I looking for high abundance? Just a lot of fish of the species I'm after? Or are you looking for keepers? You know, fish, if it's a crappie, maybe it's in that 8, 9 to 11 inch range that we're going to typically look at for keeping crappies. Figure out the species you want and the size you want to catch it, and then watch the map populate with all kinds of little orange and red dots that help you understand that these are candidates, these are places. And then secondarily, you can dive into all the other data. You can click on the lake and get a full download on all the species populations over previous years. You can look at where the launches are so you can get there. You can choose driving directions to take you right to the ramp of choice. But first and foremost, find some new lakes. Use that filter function.
That's amazing. What features in the OnX app do you use most often, or do you find the biggest conveniences in?
I have a fisheries background. It's slight. It was as part of my natural resources degree. And so I love digging in to the lake by lake population dynamics. And the cool thing about OnX Fish is that you can look at a graphical representation, like a bar graph, of each year that it was sampled. And like, I was just doing this with a fisheries biologist. We were talking to him the other day, and we were looking at a lake that is sampled every single year. It was one of the popular ones. I think it was Cass. And you watch a strong year class start off as 9 to 11 inch walleyes, and then they move up to 12 to 14s, and then 15 to 17. And you literally watch that year class hop through year after year after year, and you really start to understand the power of these fisheries data, because you're like, this is an opportunity. This is one of those boom cycles that as an angler, I can real time jump into. It was just surveyed last year. I can see where those fish are. They make up the bulk of the population. You can predict hot bites before they're hot.
That's really cool. That is a super cool feature to look at it. And the way it's visible to see that history, it's not like you're closing out of this page. Oh, what was the 2013?
Yeah. I'm not looking at a spreadsheet with loads of numbers and just having to try to digest numbers. Yeah, this is a graphical representation that's super easy to understand for anybody.
Yeah, it's cool. I use the app all the time, and it's really helpful. It's fun to use. Also, you've got that curiosity. You want to, if you're not fishing, you can just sit and just spend time on it exploring.
And your kids, like my kids now, when we go down the road, like they're literally like, oh, what's the lake next door? They click out, like they're looking at that one's got bass in it, Dad. That good bass lake. You know, like it's exciting to confirm or deny suspicions that you've always had for all these years driving by these lakes, that they could be close to home even.
Right.
But they fly under the radar because we're always headed to Leech or always going to Blacks or whatever.
Yeah, man. No, that's great. Well, we appreciate you coming on here, Joel. And as a little thank you, we've got you one of these fresco images. I always say that the wives just love to see those hanging. You put that in your bedroom or living room or somewhere else. But they're cool magnetic photo tiles that are replaceable.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Enjoy that. And thank you again for coming. If you're watching this on television, you can check out the long form version on our AnglingBuzz YouTube channel, and also listen to this wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for watching.